Good morning. It's a beautiful Wednesday, and we're still faced with this Venezuela situation. Um, Pretty crazy. And at this point, I think we all know it's been going on for years that politics really has become palace politics, right? Or palace intrigue. The stories that are pumped and fed to us every day are stories that are about personalities. This person said this about that person. This person is stupid. This person is destroyed this person, right? That kind of politics is what dominates the narratives that we are fed. If you think back 15, 20 years ago, the news was more about the facts, right? And today it's more about the personalities, whether that's social media, whether that's just the evolution of our society and our civilization as with the current configuration. It seems to be a pattern. If you look at any civilization before or empires before, they had the same trajectory, right? Towards the end, when you look at the Roman Empire, when they were building their houses, it was about palace intrigue. The French Revolution, palace intrigue, right? It really becomes about personalities and things like that. And that's kind of where we are. We've been there for years, and this is global, right? I follow lightly a lot of places. So the US, the UK, France, South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, um, Kenya, Zambia, so just a few places around the world, and other stuff that pops up in the news, Australia, New Zealand, and it's pretty much the same. We are constantly concerning ourselves with what this person thinks, what this person said, right? And a lot of it comes down to, I guess, we think that by convincing each other, we can affect policy, which will then affect what actually happens. And I mean, here in South Africa, and I'm sure this is true all around the world, we talk shop a lot and we'll amend this policy, amend this law, but there's no enforcement. And without enforcement, it's just a piece of paper, right? We need to enforce what currently exists and actually make it real. It's like if you're working in your business and every time you hit a snag, you go and change your policy, you go and change your strategy, you go and you pivot, right? You're going around in circles. You need to fix the operational issues through operational means, and we've become such a bureaucratic society that we're so far removed from the actual activity, and we think that just arguing and talking about policy, and once a policy is done, the work is done. We pack up our bags, we go home, and then 5 years later, we wonder why nothing's changed and things keep getting worse, right? So this is a structural issue now in our society. So when you're looking at Venezuela and what happened and what looks like is going to happen with Greenland, what we're looking at is um, America needing, for whatever reason, to expand its empire. It could be personality. Highly doubt it's just down to Donald Trump or the influence from Israel, things like that. I'm sure there are big factors, but I think it's more to it than that. It's not that simple. Um, and the question I think at this stage we should be asking ourselves is, what's in it for me? How does this affect me? Right? How does this affect you? How does this affect your pocket? Right? Every time you're reading this news and you're seeing what's happening, you're asking yourselves, what I'm invested in. If you have a pension fund and some savings, what are they invested in? Right? Am I over invested in an area that is going to be affected? Do I want to start investing more in oil or something like that, right? Do I need to hold some more gold for the long term view? Those are the kinds of questions you need to be asking yourself. How do I position my business for this transition that's happening over the next 2, 3 decades, right? In 30 years, you're going to be running your business and you're going to be asking yourself, how do I survive today? And you need to be thinking about that today. That's just my opinion. I think every piece of content that we're consuming, That's the lens we need to be approaching it with. Because at the end of the day, these personalities are in it for themselves. They're in it to enrich their families. Career politicians are trying to make money by being a politician. So guess what? The moment they have a chance to get a bribe, to channel some monies into their family's pockets, they will, and they do all the time, right? And more importantly, if they can if they can use their power to affect policy, uh, to get more money for themselves, they're going to do it. How else are they making money? How else are they going to get generational wealth for them and their families if politics is all they have? And for a lot of these people, politics is pretty much all they can do. For a lot of these people, it's not like they are very good at building businesses and things like that. You know, they're career politicians, particularly here in South Africa. So the question we're asking ourselves is, what's in it for me? How does this affect me? How does this affect my future, my children, and what we're doing, right? And the at the end of the day, there isn't going to be one answer, one size fits all. So that's why it's about the mindset that you approach this with, and start making those connections for yourself, right? Um, the dollar is weakening, but what's going to happen, we don't know. Is there going to be a new currency that emerges? Is there going to be a number of different currencies? We don't know. So as things unfold, you've got to be on the lookout for that. What I will say is, when an empire is in decline, or when a civilization is breaking apart at the seams, we go back to the real things. We go back to the actual stuff that matters, right? Because when a civilization or when an empire is growing, one of the ways that, or one of the stages they go through is their currency becomes so powerful that they stop producing. We saw that happen in America. Their currency was so powerful that they stopped producing, and production moved to China, right? China, India, and other places. And then we saw the capital markets really thrive, right? The bond markets, the share markets, right? Financial instruments were performing very well over the last, I don't know how many decades, and that's a sign that that civilization is reaching that stage. And when it starts disintegrating, we move back to the basics, right? We move away from we have from financial markets to what matters. So when I was growing up in Zimbabwe, right, my parents had investments for us. They had their own investments, their portfolios, and things like that, their pensions. And when things crumbled, what mattered was cement. What mattered was firewood. What mattered was oil. What mattered was salt. I mean, there was a period where if you were able to supply salt in Zimbabwe, you made a lot of money, right? We go back to the basics, to things that actually matter. And that's why gold is always a safe bet, right? Silver is also a great option because it's accessible to the everyday person, and it's used a lot in production and things that are produced, right? In goods that are produced. So we go back to the basics, right? We go back to the earth, to Mother Earth, and not these concocted, right? You can start a company today and it'll be worth a few billion. It's not real value in terms of tchotchkes and widgets that you're selling. It's value in terms of your potential revenue and the perception and the goodwill that you build with your investors, and they're willing to pay at that price. So now, as we transition and we go into this over the next, few years, few decades, the question is, how do you make sure you have safety? So in my mind, we need to separate three things: financial security, financial independence, and financial freedom, right? So when you're building for security, and security is stability. You need to have income, you need to have a place to stay, you need to have food to eat, right? And depending on where you live, food to eat might be the challenge that comes, might be the weakness that you have, or that your country has, or your region has, right? You don't have good farmlands and things like that, so food will be an issue if things go wrong. So that's something you want to be thinking about. I mean, who would have thought when I grew up in Zimbabwe, it was such a good economy and country. Who would have thought that salt or bread, we had to queue to buy bread with stacks of cash, you know, $1 trillion bonds to buy bread, right? Um, and, if we could get the flour, we would just bake our own bread. But we couldn't, right? And you start to realize what matters. So, farming, farmland is a great option, something to think about, something to look at, right? A lot of people have already sort of transitioned their lives to become self-sustaining and off the grid. So you want to be thinking about stuff like that, right? To make sure you're secure, your family's secure. You have a place to stay, you have your basic needs taken care of. There's water, a borehole, whatever it is. Um, you know, um, there are different options out there. This is just what to think about, right? So the security. In the security, when it comes to business activity, you're gonna have to look at basic commodities, right? Um, Buying and selling of actual goods that people need, and going into basics, or investing in companies that do. So remember COVID, if you invested in fast food, invested in fuel companies, petrol companies, if you invested in those types of businesses, retail, you made a lot of money. I made quite a decent chunk investing in oil and investing in retail, because we saw this thing early, right? And we put the money in, and we got our returns, right? Um, so so those are the types of things you want for your security, for your independence. This is where now you don't want to be reliant on only one thing. This is where it gets a bit interesting, and you're going to have to think about this, right? So when we start stripping away our empire and our civilization, what actually comes down to matter in terms of survival is your community. Do you have people you can organize with to get things done? And so you want to be part of communities that are in different areas. So people who are immigrants, it's an advantage. People who have family and strong ties in different continents are going to be at an advantage, because you can build in different places. Now, you're going to have to be working on those relationships, because for a lot of us, you might have good relationships with people, but they're not productive relationships. So you got to build productive relationships, or people who are already at that stage, find a way to partner with them and build those relationships, because that's what gives you options. So you're not dependent on one thing. If that crumbles, if war erupts in your area where you are secure, are you able to transition? Are you able to pick up quickly? Um, these are things you got to be thinking about. So if you're able to have presence in more than one country, for people in the US, they're blessed. They can have a presence in Canada and Mexico fairly easily, right? And many other places in the world if you're doing things digitally. But here we're talking about tchotchkes, so widgets. So whatever it is that you're manufacturing and producing or being a part of, you want to be thinking about that. If you have a good community, you don't have to be the entrepreneur. You can just partner with people who are already entrepreneurs, right? And that's going to be something that you can work at now. And the reason you got to be thinking about this existentially is you don't know how things are going to play out. These characters that are on the stage before us are all lying to us, right? For whatever reason. Some of them can't actually tell us the truth. Some of them don't know the truth. Others have their own agendas and narratives. Others are totally confused, right? So deciphering what the truth is, it doesn't matter. Here's a reality that I think a lot of people miss. Facts don't care about feelings, but patterns don't care about facts. There are patterns that exist that you can see. It doesn't matter what the actual fact is. It matters where it sits in the sequence that this pattern reveals, right? And if you can look at the pattern and you look at the sequence, You can predict what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what the fact is. It doesn't matter what the actual fact of what's happening with Venezuela, why the US feels it needs Greenland and to expand its empire. It doesn't matter that does Russia have the military capability in China combined to actually fight back, or the willingness to get involved in those wars? Um, as far as we can tell, the last few decades, China has acted in only self-interest. So for them to be defending another nation, it has to make sense for them, right? So we're not expecting anything to happen, but who knows? They might be provoked and World War III erupts. Um, so facts don't, it's not about facts, right? Growing up in a high control religion, we were drummed, it's about the truth, right? But the truth we're being told was a lie, right? Either they were confused. I think some of the early people believed it, but now that I know and I've seen some of the court documents, with Rutherford and them, maybe they knew all along that what it was, what the game was. I think it's a case that if you look at a lot of religions, the pastors and the people who create them, at some point, they get to understand that they are creating this whole thing. Uh, you know, I used to, when I was deconstructing, I watched this guy. He was an ex-pastor. I think his name is Tim. Long hair, tattoos. He was a pastor for like 30 years. He had his own church. And he talks about how he used to speak to other pastors, some of the most prominent pastors in America. And they, they understand they're in the business of meaning making and reinforcing people's beliefs. And it's all theater, right? And they struggle with that sometimes, and you can connect with it and find meaning in it so that it's real for you. But for a lot of people, once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? um, this meaning making exercise. um, so truth, facts, arguing over truth or facts, you're missing the forest for the trees, right? You're mixing the galaxy for the planets, right? Um, that's a new one. You're missing the galaxy for the planets. You're missing the forest from the trees, right? Um, the forest here is clear. Something is happening, right? And we've been hinting at this. People saying in 2012 the Earth is going to shift and we're going to go into a fourth dimension, and these channelers and people, and those people normally are talking about a vibe, right? And because things are getting weirder and weirder, maybe they're early in sensing that things are getting weirder and weirder. And so we have these stories, and these calculations from history. I was watching Graham Hancock's uh, Netflix series where they make these extrapolations and narratives. They build these narratives around ancient history and archaeology. And 2012 was a year that I think the Mayan calendar that tracks 4,000 years. Anyways, um, so there's these predictions that something big is going to happen, World War III. I mean, 2022, 2023, everybody was talking about World War III. World War III is happening. World War III is happening because of what is happening in Israel and Palestine and Russia, Ukraine. World War III, maybe we're in the middle of it. I don't know. But it's like a slow start. And so we don't, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It matters how we can respond, how we prepare ourselves. And so maybe those Jehovah's Witness drills of, are you Armageddon ready? Do you have your survival pack? We need to be doing those things. Who knows? But I think what's important is just making sure that we are ready and we are preparing ourselves. And as we do our daily activities, we're thinking about the future and creating more options for ourselves. Because if you have more options, you're able to survive, because you don't know where the threat is going to come from for you specifically, for you in your life specifically. So you got to be ready, and you got to start putting those pieces together. Financial freedom, is a luxury that if you got your financial stability and your financial independence, then freedom is something that you can sort of aim for if you want. and it's a pursuit. Um, but I think it's more important for your family to have that security and that independence. And you know, the idea here is start preparing yourselves. Um, you know, when you're leaving a high control religion, you start seeing the things from a certain way. And once you start seeing them that way, you can't unsee them. Every talk you listen to, every conversation you're part of, when you go to field service, and you're preaching to other people and you're part of those conversations, there's just something in you that just tells you, no, that's not right. That's not right. And we're at that stage now. It's stage 6, of the civilization or this empire. And they can tell us things. You can watch the news, um, but something is not adding up. And I don't think the players themselves know, because that's why history repeats itself over and over. The characters and the players in this play don't know it themselves. They are just concerned with what's happening in that moment. Um, and, their self interest. And as a base avatar, every human being is the same. We have the same inputs and outputs, same stimuli and similar reactions. What changes the reaction is the narratives, the stories we tell ourselves, and what changes is our personality, right? And then a little mix of culture and your environment. It's going to shape how we react or how we express those reactions, right? If you're hungry, you're going to want to eat. How you go about getting your food, how you go about um, um, eating that food is going to differ from city to city, etc. Right? Society to society, but at the core of it, we're the same. So we're just worried about this, the same sort of the same fears, or it's a combination of fears and desires that are driving our behavior. So we're not necessarily thinking long term. And that's why we've got to make it a mental exercise to think long term and say, what can I do today to help improve the chances of surviving whatever's going to happen? What can I do today? And you got to build a community. You got to be really looking intentionally at your investments. Um, and if you don't have something already, start now. Start small. Start with $50, whatever you can afford. Start putting it away. Start looking at crypto, right? Crypto, 99% of crypto is scams, right? So you got to be careful. Don't put money that you would otherwise lose. And go in when it's low. Stick to something simple, and then you build out to things that you're more comfortable with as you learn more information, right? These are the basics that we gotta be really intentional about. We're not doing crypto because it's fun and it's sexy. We're doing it because we need alternatives, and we need to be in a space where, should we need to, it'll be helpful, right? And the good thing about crypto is its volatility means you don't have to time the exact bottom, but you can always try to buy low, sell high type of thing. And we're talking about over long arcs, long cycles, right? Not like a day trader type of thing. Come back and look at it as often as is comfortable for you. For some people, it'll be monthly. Some people, it's quarterly. Some people, it's every year, right? So, you know, crypto, you gotta have crypto, but it's gotta be a small portion. And if it grows, then perfect, right? Um, take some money of that, put into, if it grows. So let's say crypto goes from 1 to 1,000, and you had $1,000, and now you have $1,000,000. You got to take, a big chunk of that million, and now put it into your other investments, right? And excuse me, your other in your other investments and businesses. I think that's my cue. Um, I hope you guys found value in this, and I'll see you guys on Friday, I guess. Yeah, see you guys on Friday. Cheers.